Welcome to our latest webinar, Simplifying Your Learning Outcomes Assessment. My name is Carter Allagood. I run academic sales at Capsim. Joining me today is Luke Courtwright, who is a product manager and resident expert on our new product, Modular-XM. We introduced Modular-XM in a previous webinar, but today we're really going to get into how it works. Well, okay. Before we get started, I do want to supply some context and talk briefly about Capsim. Our core business is simulation software. We work with more than 900 universities in 56 countries around the world. We support nearly 2,000 professors and about 140,000 students each year. We have a number of simulation products. They span across the business program, and they're used in introductory level courses such as Intro to Business, Principles of Management, all the way through courses like Marketing, Finance, and Accounting, to upper level courses such as Strategy and the Business Capstone courses at the MBA and undergraduate levels. We also have a suite of assessment products. They measure soft skills like leadership, communication, organization, through hard skills such as comprehension and application of some of the fundamental business concepts that they've learned while taking your programs. Measuring hard skills started about 12 years ago with a product called CompXM, which several of you might be familiar with. Because most students use our simulations as part of a team, it was difficult for professors to really know if one individual student really knew what they were doing and if they were contributing quite as much as somebody else on their team, for example. So we developed CompXM to be an individual assessment of knowing and doing. Our students, do they really understand the business concepts they've been taught, and are they able to apply them while they're managing a business? In CompXM, students work on their own. They run a business while answering general business questions about the decisions they're making. The questions are what we call snowflaked. They're unique to each student because they're based on actual decisions that the students make in the simulation. CompXM is predominantly used as a final exam in one of these courses that we mentioned, or also as a program-wide assessment for use for accreditation purposes. We have strong ties with ACBSP and AACSP and their accredited schools, and we provide enhanced reporting from CompXM that will match up the students' responses with your specific learning goals. A large percentage of our simulation users also use CompXM for this purpose. Several months ago, one of our largest clients approached us about developing an assessment that could be tailored for specific class and program-wide applications. Their other solution for program assessment was really not meeting their needs. They had no control over the content of that exam. The professors weren't happy because it measured things that they weren't teaching in the class. Administrators were not happy because it was not aligned to their program learning goals, didn't give them the information they needed. Nobody was happy because they really couldn't force the students to take it seriously, especially the seniors, undergrads, or actually in many cases to even take it at all as it was delivered outside of class. So this client has used CompXM in a few courses and really liked the experience and the reports that we were providing for them. So they wanted to know if we had something that could be used more widely across their MBA and undergraduate programs. So we proposed back to them kind of like a CompXM-like exam. It does not require the student to make simulated business decisions. The questions could be based on a set of data that changes. It could still be based on a set of data that changes for each student. So they would still be snowflaked, and they would cover a wider range even than CompXM does. The client really liked this approach, and so we started development of Modular-XM. Modular-XM is a flexible, graded test tailorable to your course or program objectives. It simplifies the learning outcome assessment for all parties. Professors can build a test that contains only the subjects and learning outcomes they're interested in assessing, or that they've taught in their course. Administrators can receive tailored reports, just like CompXM, that align exam results with their learning goals. And students will receive developmental feedback based on their results and areas that they need to improve. This is especially important when the test is used as a pretest, for example. Also, the test can be used for grading purposes. It's flexible in delivery as well. The exam duration is completely up to you. You can create a 30-minute in-class quiz, a 90-minute final exam, or even a 3-hour pre and post-test program test. Pre and post-program test. Modular-XM works with multiple online proctor solutions as well, so you can deliver outside of the classroom and still be assured that the student who is supposed to be taking the exam is the one who actually takes the exam. And now, to run us through and show us a little bit about how it works, I'm pleased to introduce Luke.
Thanks, Carter. So we'll hop in here and ping pong around a little bit to see what exactly we're working with here. So right now we're looking at what we call the professor dashboard, which is more or less an administrative hub to set up your exam. Here on the dashboard, you'll see we actually do have that pre and post test scenario that we were discussing before. And this really helps answer the question, are the students learning what we want them to learn? So if they do perform poorly in a pre-test environment, it's not the worst thing in the world, because really we want them to do well on that post-test and see that growth over time. Now, with any kind of exam, we're certainly going to want to set up the timer, when this exam is going to be accessible. But as Carter was mentioning before, we do want to work with the third-party proctoring services to ensure that you're able to get what you want out of this exam, ensure it's your actual students doing the exam. So in a lot of cases, what you can do is actually add an exam password here, give that to that third-party proctoring service, and they'll ensure that it's actually that student entering that password for them. We also have the ability to put individual student passwords in if you wanted that extra layer of security. But ultimately, we want to see what kind of content the students are going to be using. And you'll see here on this page, if you were just maybe running an accounting exam, a one-time exam even, we have this subject area filter, and you can just see all of our accounting questions. But in terms of learning outcomes assessment, we also have this learning goals drop-down here. We do use learning goals, learning outcomes somewhat interchangeably, and that really just depends on the audience that you're working with, because we view them as the same thing on our side. In this example, though, let's say we had critical thinking and or decision-making skills as one of those learning outcomes or learning goals. So we'd select it here, we can add that to our other filters, and we can see content that relates to that specific learning goal, learning outcome. And all of these other filters we can use as well. We would select those questions and simply add them to our exam and preview it below. What is this going to look like from the student perspective, though? So again, we see the student's going to be taking their pretest. When we go into the exam interface, this kind of alludes to that snowflaking that Carter was speaking about before. So we do have randomized numbers that can appear in several places. In this case, in this example, this 4.21 here in the question body is a randomized number. These response options are all tied to randomized numbers as well. The incorrect answers in this case are also tied to kind of common distractors that we might see, common mistakes that students would do in trying to calculate a response to the question. And these responses are also going to be randomized as well. So even though they're following the same formulas, even student to student, they're going to be presented in a different order. On top of that, if we wanted the students to do a little bit of digging either, you see in this report section in the left, if we click on this annual report, maybe we have some accounting, some finance questions here. These annual reports or any reports that we would want them to look at can be randomized from student to student as well. In addition to purely the numbers, we also have those parallel items. Parallel items are more or less the same content or the same concept, but a different way of asking it. So if we were maybe having a question that related to calculating a financial ratio, I might have to calculate return on assets where one of my classmates might have to calculate return on equity, something like that. Now, once a student goes in and actually submits their exam, you'll see that overall score populate on their dashboard here. Now, you have the ability to hide this if you wanted to. However, this is going to be one of the strengths of Modular-XM. When I click this View Results, you'll kind of see why. So at the top here, we have kind of a simple, what's my overall score? How am I graded in these specific subject areas? But then we have this whole section below, which is actually talking about the development in these areas. So say I was a student who was kind of worried about how I'm performing in statistics. If I were to actually click on this and expand, I see how I scored related to all of these different learning objectives. And I can kind of make an educated decision, well, am I doing as well as I want to be doing here? Additionally, you're going to see these recommended tactics here. That client that Carter was mentioning before had an extensive video library that they wanted to leverage. And we're actually able to take those videos, condense them into links, and just kind of upload them right here. And that's going to be something we'll be able to do and customize for you as well. Now, when we talk about some of our other assessment products that we've worked on over the last few years, one of those is Capsim Inbox, which is an in-basket exercise. And in Capsim Inbox, when students complete it, they're able to build an individual development plan. Now, we thought to ourselves, this is probably something that'd be really helpful for Modular-XM as well. So we've included that same technology here. So say I did want to improve in statistics, I can simply click this button and I'll be handheld through a process of building that individual development plan. So I have to identify why this is important to me first. So in this example here, our student, let's call them Skylar, has this reflect section. Data analytics is a growing field. So that might be a possible career path for them down the line. But even something like the sport of baseball, they want to further understand how some of those statistics work. So drilling down into real life situations as well, because there's always that argument, I'm never going to use this in real life. Once you identify that, you can also set the goal, come up with an action plan, and then at the top of the page here, you'll see they can actually download a PDF version of this. So even well after the course, well after the program is done, they'll still have this and can kind of hold themselves accountable. Now, what is this going to look like for you, the professor or administrator, once the exam is complete? We have a handful of different score variants we can look at. You'll see kind of an overall class average on these different subject areas here in the top right, and you can toggle from pre-test to post-test if that's completed. In the section below, we'll see kind of student by student how those worked out. And we see this overall score here. So if this is an exam you wanted to use for grading, we have that right here, right on the dashboard. In this exam details tab, though, we see some other helpful statistics when this score is posting, when the student complete it, how much time is it taking them to complete it. So if we saw something that maybe took 5 minutes, that's probably a worrying sign for our student. And we can judge if this is an appropriate amount of time to be giving them as well. But kind of more importantly, I want to highlight this custom timer column. So we were talking about an overall timer before for our exam, but ADA compliance has been a big push for Capsim over the last few years and a lot of the clients that we work with. And we took a step back and we were asking ourselves, really, how do schools account for these accommodations for their students? And with exams, it's typically, well, the student is going to get more breaks, or we're going to give them more time on their timer. Usually it's a multiplier. So in this example here, Alan, this is a 60-minute exam, but we're giving them time and a half. We're giving them 90 full minutes to complete this exam. Let's look at some additional reporting, though. We see 4 reports highlighted on this, and there's really 3 key ones. This learning objectives report here, and we'll take a look at that first. Each of these learning objectives is going to tie to an individual question, most commonly, and we can kind of see how frequently students are getting this question correct. So with a lot of these statistics questions, our students are performing well, but then something like this multiple regression learning objective, they're only getting that correct 45.8% of the time. So this is a pretty quick and easy way to look at this and ask ourselves, either at the course level or at the curriculum level across the program, how are we teaching this? Are we teaching this in the correct way that students are retaining this? Or are we teaching it at all? Because there might be some gaps from class section to class section, and this is going to be helpful to identify that. The second report that I want to highlight, we've titled it Assurance of Learning, and this is again tying back to learning outcomes, learning goals. Each of our questions is going to be tied to at least one of these, in some instances 2 or 3. And we can see again how frequently students are getting the points for the questions that tie to these learning goals. And we can see an average of that at the bottom of the screen as well. These learning goals, we have what we call our Big 7 learning goals. And a few years back, we were trying to simplify this as much as we could because we knew this was a huge pain point for a lot of our clients in terms of how can we keep this simple. So when we put together this Big 7, we looked at the top 50 business schools and their 280 unique learning goals that they had put together. And when we took a step back, we're like, well, these can all boil down to 7 buckets. So we've standardized it here for your benefits. And in the future, this report is also going to include some benchmarking information as well. So some percentiles, what percentile does my student fall in as well? We wanted to wait to provide that just based on the amount of students going through the exam to make sure the data is both valid and helpful for you in that learning outcomes assessment process. The final report we'll look at here is something called the concept matrix. This might be a little bit daunting to look at first, but really this is boiling down to the most minute detail. So when we looked at that learning objectives report before, that was giving us averages across our entire group of students going through this exam. On this page here, we can actually see if they're getting credit for these individual concepts. And all of these reports do export to Excel, so we can manipulate that data however we want. Do we want to break it down by cohort? Do we want to break it down by major? You're going to be able to put that kind of all in one place. In this whole process, kind of from my vantage point on the product design and development side, we really saw the pain points from professors and trying to say, hey, this isn't what I teach in my course. We looked at school administrators trying to get that professor investment in this assessment process. But we're also trying to consider what the accrediting bodies are looking for as well. So when we're designing these reports, we try to keep that all in mind. And we know this can be kind of an overwhelming process at times, and that's where our staff comes in as well. So while we've constructed these reports, we also have our support staff to kind of hold your hand and help you navigate that. Each client of ours does have an assigned client relationship consultant to kind of help go through these reports and simplify this the most that we can, as that is the whole purpose of the product and the webinar, I suppose. Now, I believe Carter had a few parting words here, so I'll pass it back to him before we get to questions.
All right, excellent, thanks, Luke. Okay, so a few people have put in questions. There is a question pane available in the webinar. If you have any, please feel free to put them in there. Also, if you're interested in a demo to kind of see or talk about how this could be used in your program, please just type the word demo into that field. I do want to cover, some of the things that we didn't. We have one core product with Modular Exam, which is program-wide, and it covers these subject areas. We are continuing to develop new subject areas. We're continuing to augment the areas that we already have. I did see one question that came through was asking about if we were going to be developing more items for accounting. We definitely are. We are in process with that. In fact, we've got a call out to contributing authors right now, which several of you may have responded to already. But we're looking for people to kind of help us do some of that development and also review of that content. We're doing subject matter expert review of items. Okay, other questions? Price. Yeah, one single word question, price. We didn't put it in there, but basically the full version of Modular-XM is $24.99 per student. If you want to do pre and a post test, then we do offer that at a reduced rate for the post test. It's just slightly more than that. Also, if you want a customized exam using only a couple of these subject areas, give us a call. We can set that up for you, and the price would be somewhat lower. What else we got there? I can't read that far.
So does Modular-XM have program learning goals and assessment instruments built in for all users? Or does each user, college/program, provide its own learning goals and instruments, test banks, or rubrics? I can speak to this. So when we were talking about those big 7 learning goals before, while those might not match word for word your school or even your course's learning goal, more often than not, it's going to fit into one of those buckets. And if it doesn't, that's a conversation we can certainly have offline to help with that.
Yeah, I imagine it's kind of like what we do with CompXM, where we do a crosswalk between their learning goals, ours, and we take that down to the item level to bring it over.
Exactly. Does Modular-XM also assist with AACSB? That kind of ties into the same answer we just had. That can really be used for any of those accrediting bodies.
Right, yeah, IACBE, the ones in Europe as well, is that EFMD, I think. Yeah.
We'll be sending out a recording of the webinar to all of our registrants, so you should have that later on.
We can send the webinar slides as well.
Yeah.
We will go through and answer all these questions if we don't get to it as we're talking. Something weird about the pan, I can't read.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
all right, here's one. LMS integration.
So we're able to do single sign-on integration with any of our products. If you're interested in that, please throw a comment in the chat or the questions section, and we'll make sure that gets routed to the appropriate parties. Gradebook integration is something that we're working on. We're kind of tiptoeing into the waters with some of our other kind of more simple products to start out with, and then we'll roll that out with Modular-XM later.
Okay. CompXM is best to use with the simulation, right? Yeah, they can both be used with the simulation. The CompXM is really, I still love that product. It measures knowing and doing, which is unique in the industry. And so, if you want to be able to assess a student's ability to actually apply the understanding that they've gained in your business program, CompXM is still the best tool that you can use. ModXam is, can be done in a shorter time period and maybe not quite as rigorous on the student. I don't know a better way to explain that.
I see a couple of questions on subject areas. So this slide we have up right now highlights these subject areas kind of in our common version of this exam. We do have additional subject areas if it's something you're interested in. I see strategy kind of mentioned by name here. So we do have additional content. It might be more of a version customized for your specific course or program, and we can certainly connect to build that for you.
In terms of how many questions there are in each subject area, it's changing all the time. We've got a set number right now, but we are seriously working with so many people to develop content that number changes all the time. And then accounting for subject areas, continuing that, we will cover cost, tax, audit, and the various other, not just financial or managerial. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So, Coco, we'll get back to you because I think a lot of these questions you're asking will definitely be answered in the demo. What would you suggest would be a good time for students to work through all 7 learning goals? Well, I really like the pre and the post test. I mean, What a lot of our clients do is at the beginning of the program, and it's maybe if it's undergraduate, they'll do it in sophomore year. If it's the MBA program, sometimes they'll even do it like in the first semester. But they'll give them a test that kind of covers the entire program learning outcomes of what they expect to learn over their 2 or 4 year period, or shorter, depending on what kind of program it is. But they tell the students, look, we're not necessarily expecting you to do well in this test because we're testing you on things we haven't taught you yet. However, it's a great way to get, to show the growth of understanding across the program by doing the pre and the post test. All right, so questions are coming in not in order. All right, well, we will, anything else you wanted to cover, Luke?
I think that's it from my end.
All right, guys, we are just about out of time. We will answer every question. In fact, I'll leave the window open for a little bit longer so you can continue to add questions if you think of them in the next few minutes. And we'll get back to you and get back to everybody with their demo requests as well. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.